So
Okay.
I'm Marie. Oh,
Sorry, I just thought we should mention we have a couple of Sunrise people here that are just with their videos off just to watch.
yep. So I'm Marie. I'm a coordinator for Sunrise Somerville Youth, and we're having a short conversation with Katjana Ballantyne, who is running for mayor in our 2021 municipal elections. We're going to be asking a few fundamental questions relating to Sunrise's mission, which is climate justice. For each question, there will be 3 minutes to answer, and we'll warn you visually and in the chat at 30 seconds remaining. And if you're speaking at that time, the host will mute you. The questions will be in the categories energy, infrastructure, racial justice, and education. We'd appreciate it if you didn't share the questions to keep things fair for all candidates.
All right. My name is Emily. I'm also a coordinator. So first of all, we would really like it if you would introduce yourself. So that would be pronouns, your past leadership experience, what you've done to address climate change in the past, and why you're running for office.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to repeat that. I'm introducing myself to make sure that I'm doing that, what I've done for climate change in the past, and what else were, okay, great. So it's in the chat. So thank you. I'm Katjana Ballantyne. I'm running for mayor of Somerville. I'm optimistic about many of the positive things that we've worked on in the past, and there's so much more work that we can do. I am running for office because when I announced, I said, I believe that there are 3 key qualities that our next mayor needs to have. She needs to embody the cultures and values of Somerville. She needs to have an inclusive leadership style, and she needs to have the skills and experience to be our next chief executive. And I believe I best bring those 3 key qualities to the office of mayor. I was born and orphaned in Greece. I was adopted there by a Scottish father and a Czech-German mother. We are a family of immigrants. We immigrated to the United States when I was 4. I learned then that sometimes people are afraid of differences. I was sometimes ridiculed and excluded because of my differences. It could have been an accent, it could have been the foods we ate, or it could have simply been our culture. So I learned then that it's really important to value differences, make sure that everyone is included in the process, because that's when we do our best work. I was the first in my family to go to college. I worked 2 jobs, took out loans to get a bachelor's and a master's degree. I've been working for about 30 years. I started off working in business and international supply chain management, and then for about 12 years. And then for the last 20 years, I've been working in Boston in the areas of affordability, working on affordability, on climate, creating green efficiency jobs, green economy jobs, and violence prevention. So in economic development, I've worked for an affordable housing developer, and I worked on, we gave them the housing, and then on the other end, we wanted to make sure that they had the jobs and the living wage jobs so they could have economic mobility, so they could get career ladders, career training and career ladder opportunities. In around 2010, I worked with community-based organizations to try to create green economy jobs in energy efficiency. So giving people entrepreneurial opportunities in Roxbury, Dorchester, Chinatown to create contracting, insulation opportunities to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases. And for about 5 years, I was executive director of Girls Sleep, a violence prevention nonprofit. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And what have I done to address climate change in Somerville? I've been the leader on everything climate. I have put in legislation that has improved people's lives, whether it's buildings, the natural environment, and energy efficiencies.
All right, thank you. So our first question is going to be in the category of energy. So you have 3 minutes. How do you plan to transition Somerville to an all-electric, 100% renewable energy grid, and by what year will you do so?
Can I ask you to repeat that? I'm sorry, you're fading in and out. Okay, so you have the question in here. So how do you plan to transition Somerville to an all-electric renewable energy grid, and by what year do you do so? Okay, thank you. So every question will be in the chat. Okay, so we need to establish microgrids. We need to try to use our community electric choice program. We need to educate our community. We need to educate the buyers, and we need to set up infrastructure that allows us to at least start by establishing microgrids. And we need to use the legislation to help that. We also need to have the state help in pushing that legislation. So I worked on a project in Clarendon Hill Housing, which is the public housing on North Street. We worked for a number of years to get a community process that would provide new housing for nearly 600 families, 92% women-led households, 87% children, women of color. And through the 2-year community process, 11 community meetings, we were able to pass without any zoning disagreement, and no one speaking against the project, to provide new housing. At the same time, I worked to put new legislation in that requires LEED Platinum certifiable. So that project is going for, it's going to be almost increased in density from 200 housing currently to about 600 housing currently. It will have the highest efficiency rating buildings. It will be fossil free. It will be all electric. It will have native species. So many trees, because our tree ordinance has kicked in on that. So that is an example of making sure that we bring all developers, whether affordable housing developers,
Okay, I'm sorry, we had to mute you because the time was up. So we're going to move on to our next category, which is infrastructure. So many decisions about public transportation are made at the state level. How do you believe Somerville should engage with public transit?
Hi, sorry, you're gonna have to unmute yourself. I can also ask you to unmute.
Okay, thank you. So how do you believe Somerville should engage with public transit? So I believe in public transit. How should Somerville lead? I mean, we have to lead on the local level and we have to lead on the state level. 8 out of 10 cars traveling through the city of Somerville do not stop at a residence, nor do they stop at a business in Somerville. So we have pass-through traffic that's coming through Somerville. So when we talk about the people who live here, how do we help them move around? We sort of want to unclog the streets. I support public transit. I use public transit. We need to make sure that there are dedicated bus lanes in order to move the highest number of people to the transit nodes so they can get on public, so they can get on the T, for example, and move to their, their jobs. So, we have to, the transportation pressures are coming from outside as we are trying to get people to work. And we want to try to unclog that. All the jobs are in Cambridge and Boston. The pressures are there for people to travel through there from outside the suburbs. We have to make sure that the people in Somerville can move around. We can do that through making sure that our public transit is reliable and on time and clean.
Okay, so our next question is yes or no. Do you intend to make the T free for Somerville residents?
So I support, and I have for a decade, wanting to prioritize youth and letting them be the first to have public transit. And then, yes, I would allow everybody else to have public transit free. But youth are the ones who are most affected in our community by public transit. And for the last decade, I've been working not only with Alternatives for Community Environments in Nubian Square, but as the executive director of Girls Leap to make sure that youth could get free transit.
Okay, thank you. So our next question is on racial justice and social issues. How do you view the future of policing in Somerville, and how have you engaged with the issue in the past?
Thank you for the question. I believe we've done a tremendous amount so far in listening to the voice of the community in regards to policing. We hired a racial social justice director about 6 months ago. We hired a racial social justice director 6 months ago. We told the community as city councilors, we would host community forums to discuss reimagining the police. I have been supportive of this. This has been an idea that came up nearly 20 years ago with the Human Rights Commission. I believe that we need to have those community visioning meetings so we can hear from the communities, the people who are most effective, as I have talked about a lot in the past years in terms of their need for policing or the violent crimes in policing, are residents who live in the Mystic Family Housing and in Clarendon Hill Public Housing. The Mystic Family Housing has 75% women-led households, 73% women of color. I have advocated that these women should also be at the table. We have to make sure in any plan that we're developing that those who are most effective participate in developing the policy. And I have advocated that their voice be heard and that they are in fact at the table. And my understanding with the racial social justice director, that is how they're going to plan and move forward on, is they're going to include all the communities and all the voices, all the neighborhoods and all the voices.
Okay, our next question is on the same topic, racial justice and social issues. So as you know, Somerville is a sanctuary city. how do you plan to integrate new immigrants, particularly undocumented families, into the community and especially into Somerville public schools?
So I support sanctuary cities, just hands down, completely. And because of that, then the families are part of our community. In terms of families being part, I think one of the easiest entry points in is neighborhood groups, cultural groups that introduce us to the families. We have to make sure that we have really strong relationships with our immigrant populations. I have been a supporter, have also asked for new positions for our community cultural liaisons. I added and made the proposals for the Nepalis who have not necessarily had interpretation services or connection to other services. So it is being welcoming, reaching out to their cultural groups. It means letting them know that there are services, letting them know that there are educational opportunities, and just, wrapping them around to this fold of, we're a village and we're taking care of our own. So at whatever entry point it's usually the cultural groups, their own immigrant groups that can make those introductions so people aren't falling between the cracks. So that's where we need to make the strongest relationships and then bring them into the fold. And as I said, I support sanctuary cities. So our immigrant population should feel safe.
Okay, so our fourth topic is education. So the first question in this topic, will you adapt the Somerville High School vocational program to include green job training? So that would be, for example, solar panel installation or adapting buildings or adapting infrastructure to be more sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in 2010, so thank you for the question. I think it's great. 2010, I mean, nearly 11 years ago, I was trying to work with community-based organizations out of Boston to develop green economy jobs. And if we need to add the vocational programming to make that happen, absolutely, behind it 100%. We can't leave people behind. And if there are people who are interested in this, and of course we want to make our country and our community as sustainable as possible and as green as possible, the job training has to go with it.
All right, so our last question is, how can Somerville Public Schools prepare students for their future in a world impacted by climate change?
So thanks for the question. That's a good one. I think we can start preparing from an early age. While I was president of the city council, I invited in students to talk to not only the city council, but also to the school committee to tell them what they thought our vision and our future should be. They would say, we're taught to recycle, but not all our schools have recycling, and we're not composting. And, how can we sort of make the message consistent all the way through? And that was coming from second and third graders and fifth graders that were talking to us. So how can the Somerville Public Schools prepare the students? It's to let them know about every opportunity that exists of how we can rethink what we use, think about the even the foods that we eat and the waste that we maybe leave on the trays. We can, there can be competition games between that, so who would have the least amount of waste or food waste after every lunch period. They could do it among grades, they could do it among schools. We can, we have the Mystic River. We have our ecosystem, instead of it being concrete and that we see is like, bring the kids out to the rivers, see what's going on with the rivers, see, are there invasive species or non-invasive species? What happens to our habitat? What happens to our ecosystem? I think that's in our backyards, and I think connecting to the natural environment is so important. And then, how easy do we make it for students to move around? I mean, the biggest reasons for climate change are the greenhouse gases from our buildings and cars. So how do they move around? Is it easy for them to walk around or use their bike or hop on a bus? So I think that we can use the same things we're trying to educate in our broader community and put it as part of a curriculum for the students.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. And also, thank you for sending in the questionnaire. So we're still reading through questionnaires and meeting with candidates, but we will be in touch soon. Yeah,
Great.
I think we can.
So I would also like to say thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for mobilizing to the Sunrise Movement. I know that you all created the rally in Boston a few years back. It was, from one of our organizers from Somerville, and your activism energizes all of us, and it's really important. And I can't thank you enough for really stepping up and leading on this.
Thank you. That's very nice for you to say. Well, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.